Extreme ownership means if you are representing a company or you're working for a company, you treat it just like your own company, right? So even something goes wrong and it's not your mistake, somebody else maybe in the organization did something. Instead of finger pointing, you take the approach of taking ownership of even that mistake.
Not everyone makes the news, but behind every growth-driving experience, product, and transformation are experts who shape the outcome. Welcome to Behind the Growth, a podcast for digital leaders and those aspiring to become one. Each episode features a candid conversation with a remarkable individual. Join us as we focus on their struggles, wins, and lessons learned you won't find anywhere else. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Behind the Growth. I am your host, Imran Mia, and we have a very special guest that I want to introduce you to. Somebody who is an exceptional leader in the Canadian business marketplace, somebody who I've known for a little while, and I'm very excited to have him on the show. Faisal Kazi, President and CEO of Siemens Canada. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So just to get started, Faisal, let's start with a brief intro of your role at Siemens Canada so that our audience knows a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, so Imran, as you mentioned, I'm the President and CEO of Siemens Canada. So with that, I have the responsibility for the strategic direction of the company in Canada, for the brand, and of course, for the business, which Siemens does in Canada. So these are the responsibilities.
Wonderful, wonderful. I know you've been at it for a while now and involved in the Canadian marketplace for a while. In your perspective, where do you think the market's going from a growth perspective, given we're coming out of COVID and, the economy is slowing down? So what's happening with growth in the Canadian marketplace?
Yeah, so Imran, I think, we've gone through a lot of change, as we all know. But one of the challenges which we all as humanity faces is climate change. And this is something Canada has taken a strong stand. We have a clear goal of going net zero, the country net zero grid by 2035, electrification of transportation by 2035. So that is now this commitment from the government is backed by, carbon taxes, but also a lot of incentives and subsidies to drive the green economy. So I think this is going to have impact. The budget just recently came, so we will see a lot of focus towards renewable technologies. And the other element which I see in the marketplace is digitalization. Digitalization has the potential to unlock trillions of dollars of potential. And I think this everyone is realizing. So no matter which industry you are in, I see people going on their digitalization journey. So I think these are the two drivers of the market, and I'm quite optimistic that this is still going to drive growth. These two elements are going to drive growth in the Canadian economy.
100%. I think you rightly focused on the two key areas, which is digital transformation or digitalization, as you phrased it. And of course, if you can focus on the environment and combine the two. And then, of course, with automation and AI, the future is so exciting, I think. But before we get into that, I want to bring the conversation back to you, Faisal. If you could maybe walk us through your journey. I know you've been at Siemens for about 30 plus years, I would say. You started off in technical sales, and then you've done all sorts of roles, not just in Canada, but across the globe. So I'd love to hear your journey from the start to today, where now you lead the organization across the company in Canada.
Yeah, thank you, Imran. Yeah, it's been, when I say, I've been with the company for more than 30 years, a lot of people, get shocked. So it must be.
That's because you're still relatively very young. So yeah, people absolutely think.
But in general, I think the concept of staying with the one company is not everywhere in the world. So people get surprised. But I must say I've had a really, enriching career. I've been with a great company like Siemens. So I'm an electrical engineer from University of Engineering and Technology in Lahore. I started with Siemens in Pakistan as an engineer. That was short-lived because I moved to Germany immediately as a project engineer. So I was working on a power plant project in Germany. Then I moved to a project, a very large project, which hydropower project in Brazil. So I got that exposure. That really set my career because that was a project which I started from the work statement, from the contract negotiation. And I was lucky to, engineer it, design it, be part of the design team, and then go to Brazil and commission that. So that was a full cycle. Later on, I moved to another large project in China, Guangzhou. It's one of the largest pumped storage power plants in the world. I did a project in the Philippines, also a power project. And after doing a lot of project management, moved towards sales. So I was heading global sales for one of the Siemens businesses. And that led me into becoming a business manager for the infrastructure business of Siemens at that time, which included stadium projects, building projects, large projects, which also gave me the opportunity to be leading the Olympic Games China project for stadium projects. So a lot of exposure in different countries. Also at that point, I went back as I was working and did my master's in business administration while I was working. And then it led me to change my field a bit. And I became responsible for the IT operations center, which was basically the digitalization which we are seeing today.
Very diverse from infrastructure to sales to IT.
So that was like the IT plant solution, so industrial IT, and was also quite fascinating for a couple of years. Then I got the opportunity to move to the Netherlands, where I was responsible for engineering and commissioning of all Siemens activities in Netherlands. And that was absolutely fascinating experience because I got the exposure to, learn about the complete Siemens portfolio and how that's engineered and commissioned. Then again, I went back to college for a small diploma. I did a diploma in law. And after returning back from Netherlands to Germany, I was responsible for the Siemens transformer business for North and South America, which was very exciting with multiple factories across both these continents. And that also led me to come to Canada. It was difficult to run a North American business out of Germany with so many factories. And that also then led me to, lead the Siemens transmission business for North America, which included, of course, the US market. We did some acquisitions. So I became chair of a couple of companies which Siemens had acquired, a different kind of exposure. Then in 2014, I made a bit of a personal, let's say, decision to focus. Right. My previous job involved a lot of travel, a lot of out of country. So I have 3 kids. So in order to maintain the balance, I said, I want to focus in Canada. So I got a larger responsibility. That was the energy management division in Canada, which I was leading. It worked out well in 2017. Then I was promoted to the CEO of Siemens, which of course was a career highlight for me. And since then, the exposure which I got been different because with that role, I came on board of certain Siemens entities, but also external boards. Like I'm on the board of Business Council of Canada, the Toronto Region Board of Trade, German Canadian Chamber of Commerce. So it gave me a totally different exposure. And I'm quite proud to say that in end of 2019, Siemens Canada was named the best country of Siemens, best country award. So that was a big highlight for me.
Amazing.
And my team. And so again, went back a bit during COVID, had more time to education, did my director education program and, get the ICD certification. So it's been an exciting journey and doing business in almost 40 countries over the...
That is phenomenal. One thing I gather from your overview is that not only you, like your decision to stay with Siemens, but it seems like Siemens really embraced you as a family member. They made you comfortable. And the second aspect, I noticed that you never gave up or quit learning. So every opportunity that you came across, you decided to go back to school and brush up or learn some new skills. So this is phenomenal. My question is, how did these opportunities come by? Like, did you go looking for them? did Siemens say, hey, you did such an amazing job in Brazil and China. We want you to go to the Netherlands and do this. How did this all happen?
Yeah, so firstly, I think I would just echo what you said about my company, Siemens. It's a company which takes care of its people. And I must say, over this journey, it's been absolutely fascinating. And I always was taken well care of. Siemens is heavily invests in development of people. And so it's not like that I planned my career that way, but opportunities came. There was needs which came. Somebody's, looking for somebody. Some role gets opened up and companies say, oh, we have a role in Netherlands. Would you be interested? So they just came in and I was well supported going there because just like you said, you asked initially, what were your challenges? So, it was like when I moved from Pakistan to Germany and my first project was a German project. So I had to learn German. So you can imagine the setback you have. You're doing something and you don't even understand the language. And then same deja vu I had when I was in Netherlands, where I went there and I was running this huge department with 400 people doing all engineering for the company. And everything was in Dutch. So I was learning Dutch as well. So it was a combination of my company trusting in me
Mm-hmm.
and myself also being ready to take that challenge. Even when I took over the transformer business, which included a lot of factories, I was not coming from a factory environment. I was coming from a project. But that's where Siemens comes in. Siemens said, okay, we trust you. We trust the core values you have, the core capabilities. And then it's a matter of how you learn. And so I become a very strong, firm believer of growth mindset, that I do believe that people can learn everything if they have the appetite for it and if they are motivated to do that.
100%. Speaking of learning German and Dutch, you lived in other countries as well. So how many languages do you fluently speak? Or
Yeah, I would say fluently, it would be like Urdu, it would be English, it would be German, it would be fluent. And Dutch is a bit rusty these days, but it can come back. And at the moment, I'm learning French. So it would be 5. And then if you can add like the Punjabi or the Hindi, then that goes as well.
Amazing. That's so phenomenal. And it sounds like the way you described it, you pivoted often in your career. Yeah. And you briefly described some of the challenges around learning the culture or not knowing the language. But what would you say like some of the major struggles were along the way as you pivoted in different roles?
I wouldn't call them really struggles, but it's, of course, whenever you're pivoting. But I think one of the tough moments of the career was when we were all hit with the pandemic, COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And you can imagine we're a large company in Canada. If you include the affiliates, we are more than 4,000 employees. And at that time, suddenly everything stops. And you have to run this business. We are part of the critical infrastructure of the country. So, and that being the CEO, of course, the responsibility comes right at you.
Right.
And so for our office employees, we had a flexible working arrangement, but usually 5-10% of the people were working from home at a given day. And we had to pivot from that 5-10% to 100% online, right? So you don't know if your IT systems are up for it. The supply chains got clogged. We were again lucky, we had this huge supply chain benefit because being a global company. But the toughest thing was, the factories. So we have multiple factories in Canada. And now if you shut down a factory, it impacts not only Canada, but it impacts other countries because we have a global reach from our factories in Canada. So, pivoting there, we had to change the processes that no two people come together and maintain their social distances. So that was a real pivot challenge, which, gave me a lot of sleepless nights. And, but all in all, I'm very, very glad we have a very strong team. It's more challenging, one on the business side, but also it was about health and safety of people.
Right.
So in the end, it worked out well. We actually were always maintained throughout the COVID. We were producing. None of the factories got shut down. In fact, our productivity was very good. And I'm proud to note that would say that we didn't have any work-related COVID cases. So it all turned out well. Amazing. But that was a challenge.
Amazing work. So are you still hybrid now, or is everybody back to work 5 days
Yeah,
a
we
week?
are, we are hybrid. We are hybrid. Our position is we are performance based and not time based.
Right.
So it's all about the performance. If you need to come into the office to ensure your performance, then we encourage you to come to the office. We have not forced anybody, but we do believe that 2 to 3 days is our hybrid model. We encourage people to come 2 to 3 days and be in the office because that brings, that has something to do with culture. And like when I was growing in my career, I learned a lot from observing people. So if you're not coming into the office, the new generation misses on that.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that is a challenge across the board. And most organizations have settled on in sort of a hybrid model. And I don't think anyone's going back to a 5-day work week anytime soon, but it might happen in the future. Who knows? So I wanted to briefly touch upon your journey again. You went through so many different roles within Siemens. It's almost like you got your wish, but at any point did you feel that you missed out on something during this journey?
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting question. Yeah. I must say, Imran, when I reflect back on my whole journey, I wouldn't want to miss anything. Yeah. Because I think everything, even, in business, sometimes things are tough. I've had tough projects. It was always, you come out stronger with these kind of things. And with the empowerment which we have in our company, I could do a lot, So as you saw, different roles, sales, project management. I've also managed R&D, so business management. So I don't know if I could say, that I missed on something I should do more. Maybe the only thing I would say, when I was in Netherlands and at that time, my boss said, Faisal, contracts are very important. So why don't you go into law and do a diploma? So I went to Leiden University as I was working. A company was generous enough to support me with that education. I just kind of really like that, going back and the field of law. So maybe if I was born again, maybe I would be a lawyer. It was just a very interesting, at least the learning perspective. But I still, when I now think about it, law and contract is one part of the organization. So in my current function, I get to deal with contracts and I get to use. But that's something which I would say, oh, that was very exciting, having in the university, doing case studies and having two teams and, doing cases and, that kind of it was very, 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 very exciting coming as an engineer, electrical engineer, going into law I thought that was exciting. But on the career side, I think I won't change anything what I've seen till now.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I also took, when I was in university, I took a law. It was one course, but it's nothing close to your real life experience when you're dealing with big contracts. So yeah, I can appreciate that you went back and you focused on a diploma. I think that really, especially if you're leading an organization, you need to understand the different complexities, and the magnitude of your deals is huge, right? So it gets really complex. So I think having a little bit of a law background definitely helps. I also want to ask, it sounds like most of it worked, the way things turned out for you. Everything seemed to work, but was there anything that didn't work that, you felt like could have been better?
I would say, like I said, in the business environment, if you are in a business like I've been, large projects, et cetera, there are always some hiccups can happen, right? So you can always say in hindsight that, oh, we shouldn't have done that, or we shouldn't have taken that, or the contract was too weak.
Mm-hmm.
So you can there are many things you can reflect on. We call it in our company corporate memory. So we learn from it. So there is a corporate memory in my organization, which we maintain and we learn from it. But as I said to you early on, after that, even if you go like fast forward, when you're in a tougher situation like COVID, that's when, they say when the going gets tough, the temps get going. That's when you see the mettle of a company. And I have always been surprised how, even in the toughest of situations, my company and my team, my colleagues, and we all came together and with the focus of never letting down a customer. If I would say this is one brand of Siemens, we stand for our customers. So from that point of view, maybe quite a few things where I would say, oh, we should have done it totally differently. But in the outcome, we came out stronger. And I think we, in fact, gained a lot of customer loyalty because quite often customers have told me, Siemens has really, we thought it's not going, but you really delivered on what we required. So there are things, but on the end, there's a lot of learning and corporate memory.
Of course. And I agree with you. When you exceed expectations and when you deliver for your customers, the loyalty then is always there. That comes back. So that's great. But just to a little bit go deeper on the same question, we in our personal and professional career, we do tend to make mistakes. So I wanted to see, where did you feel that you may have made some mistakes, and what advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah, so I think I learned on, this concept of extreme ownership in, like, let's say, during my career. And extreme ownership means if you are representing a company or you're working for a company, you treat it just like your own company, right? So even something goes wrong and it's not your mistake, somebody else maybe in the organization did something, you, instead of finger pointing, you take the approach of taking ownership of even that mistake. And this is extreme ownership. And I think this is something I learned on during my career when I was confronted with some tough projects. I learned about this attitude, this culture of Siemens of taking extreme ownership. And maybe this would be my advice, to take on this day one, because we sometimes, especially when you're in an early career, you do feel, oh, it's not in my control. So I'm just part of the puzzle. And somebody said this, I did this. But even at that moment, now I'm looking at it, if you take ownership and say, look at this is something I see, then suddenly it's such an empowering feeling. It's such an empowering feeling. So this would be one advice which I would give. The other advice, and Imran, maybe we are also from a same cultural background. When somebody says negative to you something and say, oh, Faisal, you did it really bad, or you should have done it differently. There's a human tendency to be a little bit
defensive
and offended.
Yeah.
And this I learned while working in different cultures, like in Netherlands and in Germany, that actually it's a gift. If somebody is giving you a critical feedback, it is a gift for you to improve on. And this would my other advice, that not even embrace feedback, but in fact, when you're growing in your career, demand feedback, because the higher you go up, people are shy in giving you negative feedback. You can see that the positive feedback you're receiving suddenly increase, the ratio of positive to negative feedback increase. People, want to, somehow make you happy. And that's where you have to be on the ground reality and say, look, I'm the same person. I'm human. I'm making mistakes all the time. And, demand feedback. And then you will find colleagues or your employees who will be open to give you feedback. And because, the concept is, and which I also learned in Siemens and heard from some of my leaders, was nobody's perfect, but a team can be. So I think we have to all accept none of us is perfect. We are humans. We all make mistakes, but together as a team, we can be. So that would be my other lesson to take feedback positively and don't get offended. Some people do get very offended.
That is just a phenomenal piece of advice. Thank you for sharing that. I also, just a couple of days ago, maybe last week, I was reading on social media, somebody posted a term they coined, blameless culture. Just going back to what you said, is not to focus on finger pointing, but focusing on how do we fix the problem? How do we find a solution? So when you develop that kind of mindset, then, as a team, as an organization, you're always growing because your mindset is focused on finding solutions rather than, finding a person or pinning the blame on
because
somebody.
it doesn't change anything. If you even find somebody who made a mistake, it doesn't change anything for the customer. So why waste time on that?
100%. No, that's a great piece of advice. So I do want to ask you one very important question that I know you're personally passionate about, and that is about corporate social responsibility. I know more and more leaders and organizations are adding purpose to their core values. And I know you have that as part of your core values. Siemens does, many other organizations. And I know you value giving back. How do you inculcate a culture of corporate social responsibility into an organization? As a team, how do you propagate that?
Yeah, you're right, Imran. I think it's a real core value for Siemens. We very strongly believe, and I say this publicly, that the purpose of a company is to create benefit for the society. And if a company is not doing that, it has no right to exist. So this is the core value. You bring in what is your benefit. For us, we also have a clear matrices, which we call business to society. And now you have to set the tone from the top. You have to make sure, you have to show compassion. You have to, and it is quite contagious actually. And like in Siemens Canada, I'm so fortunate that there are such generous employees because that motivates people when you give back to your communities, when you do that. So I think you just have to, to your question, just has to emphasize from the top. And I always say sometimes when we're having business reviews, I said, okay, the more we will earn, the more we can give. Because if you're not earning more, then other people will tell you what you need to do. But if you're earning more, you can give back. So it's like links. And there's another equation which I have no proof about, but I do believe that the more you give, somehow your company does better. So there's no equation. I cannot prove it to you, but this has been my experience. Like even during COVID, when my management team and the global management team, they donated their entitlements. So we did as well. My management team, I was very proud. So, we bought computers from that money and gave to schools, people who couldn't afford computers and Chromebooks. And we had a fantastic year despite all that. Yeah. So somehow there is a bit of a link which I cannot prove.
I think you can prove. I think in our culture also, like we believe the more you give, the more you said it rightly earlier. The more you give, it comes back to you, multifold. So the same applies to an organization, right? I think it's phenomenal that I was reading some stats since 2017. Your team has donated cash and in-kind donations, almost over $3 million. So that's just phenomenal.
Yeah. And that's a good part, Imran. It's a grassroots. It's just the people and our employees doing that. Like one of my favorite team building event is when we plant trees. So we have planted thousands of trees, which creates benefit for society, reduce the carbon footprint. And at the same time, it's an absolutely amazing team building, going out and with your things and, planting trees. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. And please keep up the great work. Thank you so much for taking the time with me today and appearing on Behind the Growth. Well, folks, this is it for this episode. Please tune into Behind the Growth episodes. They can be found on mobilelive.ca/podcast. If you have a story to share, please reach out to me at imran.mia@mobilelive.ca. Faisal, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, how do they get in touch with you?
I'm on LinkedIn, so people can connect there.
Wonderful.
Okay, very wonderful. And thank you for having me, Imran. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much and take care. We'll be in touch. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Growth. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow along on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. This podcast is brought to you by mobileLIVE, a team of digital experts specializing in designing experiences, building products, and scaling technology. For more episodes of Behind the Growth, please visit mobileLIVE.ca/podcast.